it gives us an understanding of our psychology as it is, and it also helps us reconstructing that psychology into a new version, the best version that is possible.
So we often say, no, that you don't do yoga, yoga happens through you.
My dear brothers and sisters, the love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you. I have with me once again Aditi, and what we are going to talk about today is one of the lesser known, very pregnant quotations from Sri Aurobindo's The Synthesis of Yoga, and that is, yoga is nothing but practical psychology. I'll not ask Aditi to define what psychology is because she's an expert, and an expert is a person who knows more and more about less and less. So, just the simple question, what psychology is, might start off a monologue, which uh, will take away all the time we have for the conversation. So, I'll just define it in the layman's terms that it's a study of the mind. And why do we want to study the mind? Because if we understand the mind, we'll understand human nature. And that in turn will help us live a happier life, be happy ourselves, and also make others around us happy. So that is a simple way of looking at what psychology is and why we need to study psychology. Now, yoga is something which people would not normally associate with this type of an understanding. But in fact, yoga not only gives us an insight into human nature as it is, but also tells us why as it is not satisfactory. It is not good enough to help us lead a happy life, and also tells us how to transform or change this human nature so that we can be happier. Of course, what makes us happy can itself be debated, and different things would make different people happy. And that's why they say one half of the world does not understand the happiness of the other. But then there is time tested wisdom which tells us that there are certain things which we all want, and we pursue them, but most of the time unsuccessfully because we are looking for them at the wrong places. Now, why all that happens is something which yoga helps us understand. So, with that little introduction, I'll pass on to Aditi to talk a little more about how she looks at yoga in terms of uh, psychology, that is, how it is a psychology, and then how it can help us transform the way we are.
I want to pick it up from you said something about change and how we all aspire for that change. And when you look at change from a lens of psychology, it is like, how can I become better? And how can I understand the other person? And more so, how can I change the other person so that I can get what I want? And usually, if you see in psychology, it's more about understanding the person. But when we look at psychology from the lens of yoga, it is about what change can I bring in myself? And to change something, first I need to know that. So if I want to bring certain changes, and I have to know what is the current situation. So yoga in that sense helps us to assess the current situation, that where am I? What am I doing? What are the tendencies I have? How can I work on them? So yoga immediately brings in light to all the working and functioning of our psychological framework. So that's the biggest contribution, that when we widen the understanding of yoga as a process and not just any activity or anything on the outside, but when we look at our inner landscape from the lens of yoga, it immediately brings our attention to the movements of nature within us. And once we understand the movement of nature within us, we know how to align with it. We know what to change, what to offer, how to do that. So suddenly it gives us a window into that inner landscape, which we don't see on the outside. So the fundamental shift when Sri Aurobindo says that yoga is nothing but practical psychology is the shift that the focus is now on the inner nature, the inner movement, the inner working. So that's the fundamental shift, that the starting point is the inner landscape. Now, how one gets to the inner landscape in itself is a journey, in itself is a process. But to understand that what is your starting point and where are you looking at becomes the key element, that okay, this is where I'm working. So I'm not just busy with my instrumental arrangement, which is like my outer nature and all of those things, that how can I fix it here temporary, how can I take it this from the world, make it better. So all that do's and don'ts on the outside, it immediately shifts your view in the inside and see, this is the treasure, this is what you need to work on, this is your nature. So this is the greatest gift of yoga. And then when you start working, that process unfolds and that becomes practical. Because what is practical? That what you can actually work hands on, and that brings in change. Not something just I'm fixing on the outside, but making that shift so that whatever is happening on the outside, it is coming from the right base. So correcting the base is yoga in that sense. So how do you correct that base? Then that becomes your nature. So whatever is your understanding of your temperament, your nature, the pitfalls in it or everything. So that just becomes a way to really function on the outside. So this is what is like, if we understand that, and I think we can build on it and go on and on. But the first prime message is that fundamental shift, that what am I working on? Am I just working on the outside and making makeshift arrangements, or I just got the base which needs work? So arriving at that becomes the starting point, as I said. So that is where now we can start working on. So yeah, that's what I think. What do you think?
Yes, you made an important point that it's basically an inside out approach. We are looking at what is within us, and that helps us reevaluate also what is outside us. It may be something as simple as food. Now, one may say that's normal human nature to look upon food as a sensory pleasure. We tend to eat what tastes good. But then that is one way of looking at food. Is there another way of looking at food? Yoga can bring about an inner change which makes us look at food differently. And then we may start choosing more for health than for taste. Now, the change is within, but it's affecting what is outside us.
Yes. And also, it depends, like, especially when we talk about yoga and we're talking specifically in terms of what Shrabindo has given us. So there's a certain sense of philosophical understanding, which when you feel called for, you automatically start working towards it. So when Shrabindo says that, okay, you have to work on your inner nature, I may not start with an experience that, oh, I have that experience of the inner nature. But there's an aspiration that, yes, when he's saying that there's an inner nature and that needs to be worked, I make an effort to make that shift. And when I make that effort to shift, then certain things starts opening up and then the experience comes in. So it's like that is why aspiration is so fundamental, that I know there is something. The master is saying there's something. I want to know that something. So can I invite that something inside? So that aspiration becomes the base for really to everything to start unfolding. So it's really like I'm inviting somebody. I'm like, okay, now I want to work. So first is that will, that our little ego decides that, okay, fine, let's see what you're saying, that there's something. Let me also collaborate and see if there's something. So that will starts putting itself into action. And that invitation, then it's like, okay, now I want that to happen. So what do I do? So I make space for it. So then I make space for it. It means that I start cleaning. So first is the invitation, first is the aspiration, that whatever is given to me is not sitting well with me. There's something which needs to come from the outside. And when I say outside, it's more of the higher source, not from the surface outside. So when something has to come, so I'm inviting with all my sincerity that please come. So now when I've decided there's will, then I'm like, okay, but where will that come? Like, where will that whatever person, being, whatever will sit? So then it's like, oh, I have to make place. So it's like if I invite somebody in my house, then I have to also make space for them to sit in the house. I can't just say that, oh, okay, I called you, but no, I know I have no place for you. So that's more of a mental understanding that in my mind I've met you. But if in my experience I have to meet you, then I have to meet you face to face. And for me to meet you face to face, I have to have space. And creating that space is cleaning of the nature. That how am I creating that space for the higher power, for the divinity to reside in me, to work through me? I create that place inside of me. And how do I clean? So basic, what is the fundamental process of cleaning? So I kind of, it's like a stock taking, or this is required. This is not required. This can go away. This, okay, maybe I'll use it later. So the more attached I am to something, the more time it takes to get it out of the system. So the same works with human nature. So if I have certain desires, certain feelings, certain habits, so if it's just outside, I'm not so attached to it, I can like, okay, so say you gave the example of food. So if you tell me that, Aditi, okay, this food is not healthy for you, stop eating fried fruit, for example. So I'm like, okay, I can leave it because it's not my favorite. But say if you tell me that, okay, Aditi, stop eating chocolates. That's my favorite. So for me, it will take time. Maybe I like, okay, can I eat just one a day or then slowly like once a week and then slowly I can give it up. So same with my psychological framework. So if I'm really attached to say that's idea, say I'm very attached to the idea that nobody loves me, for example. Now this is a idea I'm attached to. No matter what my experience is, everything I see from this lens. And now yoga is asking me to clean that, to offer it to the higher, to let it flow. So it will take the longest because then I have to see that, okay, what are the past impressions? Okay, I have to then put in a lot of effort to call the higher, to clean the lower. So all the process manifests. Then what happens is once you open the box, it's not just the same thing opens up. Many other things also come up, then to deal with it. And then becomes a process which is a parallel process. So I'm calling the light. I'm through the help of the light, I'm working on the dark. And then the darkness is converting into light. Then that is also supporting me to further clean the dark. So the process becomes deeper and deeper. So the practical aspect is that once I initiate, then it takes its own course. So we often say, no, that you don't do yoga, yoga happens through you. But what you do the initial push. And what is that initial push? That initial push is your aspiration, is your invitation. And once the light enters, then you just don't have to interfere in that process. You just sit back and you say that, okay, this is the working happening. And that is where the witness attitude comes in. That I'm working on my nature, but it's not that I'm interfering in the micromanaging. I have invited the higher force. So my all my energy goes in the invitation. And then how do I not interfere in the process and let the process unfold? And to let the process unfold needs higher effort and energy because as human beings, we have a tendency of force fitting ourselves everywhere because our ego is the prime focus. So till the time ego is our prime focus, I want to contribute. I want to be known. I want to identify. I was like, oh, I am working on myself. Oh, I am cleaning myself. So if I remove that I, the cleaning is happening because the cleaning is happening based on how my temperament is, how my nature is, what are the resources available. But if my ego comes into the picture, then I was like, oh no, this use two-third, this use one-fourth. So the mental aspect comes in, and then when we say the passage, say from the lower to the higher, then we only like come in between the passage. So how not coming in the way is also yoga. So when we should not always associate yoga with action. A very conscious inaction in itself is yoga, where we let the things happen, and that needs a lot of control. That needs a lot of work on the ego understanding of our life. So yeah, that's where I feel it becomes a more and more a very practical process because it's just happening in front of you.
Well, if I were to summarize what you have said, essentially, yoga is a process of change. Not only it's a process of change, it also gives us an understanding of how we are and why we are so, which is what Sri Aurobindo has called our lower nature. And at the same time, we have this aspiration to get better, which means move towards our higher nature. And Sri Aurobindo has put it very well in this chapter where he talks about yoga being practical psychology, in that the lower nature is based primarily on limitation and division. In fact, division, the sense of division is the result of limitation. The two are interrelated. The limitation is very limited knowledge or awareness. And that helps us, that leads to our identifying ourselves with the body and the mind. And the body and the mind are individual and revolve around the ego. So that ego is the sense of separation or division. And that is what gives us the so-called typical normal human nature. Of course, within that, there will be a wide spectrum. But at the same time, sort of roughly speaking, that sort of is where majority of us are. Uh, identifying ourselves with the body and the mind, that is the limitation. And that in turn leading to a sense of division, which is ego-centered. Now, this we can see can lead to a certain limited satisfaction of, say, getting some satisfaction from food or sleep or from some relationships or events which go our way, which means if things, so long as things are happening the way we would like them to. Now, that is what uh, makes us happy. But then, since things can't go that way all the time, we can't always get the food that we want. And the people whom we live or work don't always behave the way we would like them to. They have their own individuality. And therefore, we are guaranteed to be not happy. On the other hand, as we move from this towards higher nature, which is a process, and we, we can change our way of looking at things, and we move from limitation towards a wider and deeper knowledge, and from the sense of separation to a sense of unification. And that is not just sort of trying to mold the mind, that this is better than this is likely to make me happier, and therefore let me change it this way. Let me not feel divided from others. Let me feel one with others. Let me not be dependent upon food and things like that and other sensory pleasures. So let me overcome that. No, it is not just molding the mind. It is an inner change which is happening in the light of a higher and deeper knowledge. Because yoga is something which is based on a spiritual philosophy. And that spiritual philosophy gives us a deeper insight into who we are and what the rest of the creation is and how we are related to the rest of the creation. And once we discover that the essence of all creation is the same, and in case of human beings, that essence is what we call the soul, and that gives us a common thread which unites all of us, then we find that the viewpoint changes. Say something like this, if we are, say, stuck in a traffic jam, then uh, if we are ourselves stuck in the traffic jam, the view is very limited. We are getting very restless because we are in a hurry, and all our attention is focused at the vehicle immediately in front of us and maybe two or three vehicles ahead of it. And when that vehicle, two or three vehicles ahead of us, moves a little, we know that after that the vehicle behind it will move, and after that the vehicle immediately in front of it will move, and then I'll also move. Now, that is our limited vision. But suppose you were in an aeroplane and you look at the roads in the city, then you will just feel that this traffic jam is only a minor aberration. Most of the traffic is flowing quite all right. It at the most will look like a minor aberration. And if you go still higher, you'll see only the clouds. You'll not even see the roads. And the clouds look beautiful, but same time, uh, we can be prepared for something higher. If the plane ascends still higher, we'll see only sunshine. And then all that uh, stress that we had because of the traffic jam is gone. Although the traffic jam still exists, we are aware of it, but it doesn't affect us anymore. So that is what happens in the process of yoga also. We are not getting indifferent, we are not becoming unaware of what is going on around us, but our way of looking at changes. It's a long process, and as you put it beautifully, that it starts with the same tool which helps us in ordinary worldly action, and that is the ego, the much maligned ego. That is what creates in us a sense of dissatisfaction with the way things are. We find that our uh, goals, even when they are met, our desires, even when they are fulfilled, are not giving us the promised happiness. And then we start looking for something different. And that is, again, something which is inbuilt in us. A dim awareness that we are more than the body and the mind is also inbuilt in us. And we start seeking what is it that is beyond the body and the mind. And with that aspiration, as you said, we send an invitation to the divine within us. And we get more and more prepared to hand over the charge of our lives to that divine within us. And but same time, for that, the divine has to arrive. and take charge. And for that, we have to, like, you invite a guest, you clean the house, you prepare the house. So we start preparing ourselves by going through that process of inner purification. And that's the interesting part in integral yoga. The inner purification does not mean rejecting all our all the impulses that can obstruct this type of a change. We don't reject anything. We don't reject even the emotional part of the being, because that is what also can be transformed into all vitality and enthusiasm, which is something which we do want to retain. It is the same feelings and emotions that translate into the highest form of love, and that also we want to retain. And therefore, we are not rejecting anything. We are working on transformation, and that is what changes our nature uh, from lower nature to higher nature. That is essentially what the journey of yoga is about. And that is what makes it a very practical way of looking at it, a practical way of it molding our psychology. And this involves basically two processes. One we may sort of compare with illumining. That is, that inner light is there, but so long as we live in the awareness of that limitation and division, that light does not sufficiently illumine our minds. So when we start getting rid of that barrier, and it starts illumining more. The second process we can call it chiseling. That is giving it a better shape. And that is what reveals the statue within. We start with a stone, but then the statue is already there within the stone. We have to chisel it. So it is this process of chiseling, which probably uh, we have to do. And then we find that automatically, without much uh, on our side, the illumining begins. And that illumination, which means that our process has to be a little more difficult and painful. And that's why sadhana can be difficult and painful. As Sri Aurobindo says, the blissful moment comes only when you start receiving that illumination. And when you receive that illumination, which is not, again, a one time event, it's again a progressive process. And that's what keeps us on the path. We start feeling more and more of that bliss, which comes from a higher and deeper view of life, a higher and deeper view of ourselves, and higher and deeper view of people around us. So I think I have spoken more than I intended. Now, I think you can say whatever crossed your mind while this was going on.
No, I think many things crossed, but what stayed is more in terms of you spoke about the progressive process. And I think that is something which is very important to understand that once you take to the path, because there are a lot of people, especially when I look at youngsters, who are looking to find meaning in life, who come to psychology as a field to study, to know themselves better, to discover certain, like the hidden truths that nobody's telling them. But the moment when you said no, the light enters. The moment the light enters and they see their darker parts, the light shows them, and there's like, no, no, this is not what I'm looking for. They shut that and go back to their instrumental arrangement. So I think at that moment, it's very important to understand that slowly and steadily things will align. So to keep the aspiration steadfast, that becomes very, very fundamental. So this is very important because, especially from a psychological lens, the aspiration is to know. So the aspiration to know is very much like aligning with the field of exploration in psychology. But what to know and why to know needs a deeper analysis. That, okay, I want to know myself, but what aspect of myself? So I'm knowing, okay, why am I behaving like this? But am I shifting to a deeper orientation? And then I'm able to sit with it and see where it aligns. So if I want to work on my nature, what are the methods available? So where is the help available? So like we spoke about ego and we often repeat the word ego, but in yoga it is more about the progressive surrender of ego to the higher. But when you look at the psychological element as a basic understanding we have, it is more of strengthening the ego. So what like I find very, like the moment I said very, I kept my hand on my heart that it's so like comforting in a way that there's something higher that is taking care of you, and you have to open yourself more and more to that and let the process unfold. So that support, and especially when we talk about human nature, there's a lot of human nature that is governed by things which we don't know on the surface. Like we often say that I felt like this, I don't know why. Or this came up, I don't know why. Or this triggered me, I don't know why. So the more people focus on why, that is when they turn in towards psychology. And then we go to like that, okay, there's a subconscious element in your personality. You need to bring it and just open it, clean it. And yoga has such a beautiful measure to clean it. It's like that is individual as well as universal. It's fine. You don't have to worry. You have the higher. So it's like you're holding the hand of the higher, and then you are. It's like if I want to go in a like a pit, I have to hold somebody on the outside, and then I go inside the dark, the pit, and see what is there, like how people clean, no? So they hold something on the outside and then they enter into those holes so that they know that somebody is there to pick them up. So if I'm not holding anything higher and I just go into the pit, then I'm lost in the dark. So then there's no point, and then I'm like, oh my God, I'm like this, and then it just darker and darker. So if I want to explore my personality, if I want to make connections, whatever, then I have to hold on to the light and then go to inside and see, okay, what is there and bring it up and offer it. Okay, this I can see, this I require or not. So this constant connection is what yoga gave. So how yoga made psychology a very practical aspect is that it linked the higher with the lower. It said that, okay, you want to explore lower. Lower is a part of your evolutionary nature. But there's also a higher that is part of the future of the evolution. And I can show you that. I can give you the assurance of that. So you're holding the light and then cleaning. So then it's like, okay, if you want to sit, you don't sit in the dark, you sit in the light. So you go in the dark, clean. So light becomes your recognition, light becomes your identification, light becomes your home. So when light becomes your home, everything is functional. So if I have light in the house, I can function. But if there's dark in the house, I'll just sit in the one place and wonder, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So yoga removes the darkness through bringing in the light, and that makes us very functional in the world. So that functionality is tending towards transformation, not the egoistic understanding of, oh, I want to change because I want to be the best. That's not transformation. Letting the light turn the darkness into much more field of play of action, that is transformation. And for that, that connection is important, and that connection is your work. So that's the effort, that's the aspiration, and that's day to day. I mean, that's every day. So that is how every experience becomes an insight into your practical way of being because you're connected. So it's like if I'm holding the torch forever, it's showing me everything, and it's also showing the core, it's also showing the possibility. So past, present, future, everything linked, and this is presented to me and I'm working. So that is, if we understand, then it's a field of play. Then it becomes a joyous process, like you said, that I know that I'm being held and I'm working. So then anything that comes up in my nature, I'm not fearful. It's like that child in the class. No, if I don't know, I will ask the teacher because I know the teacher will help me. I have the teacher. But if I don't have the teacher, I'm like, should I ask? Should I not? Or should I pretend that, okay, I know everything? That pretense causes all the psychological disturbances. So in light, there is no pretense because you can't hide anything from the light. In darkness, you can pretend. And pretense then leads to another complication. We all know how we want to hide one thing and all of those things. Like we know how human beings operate. So I think that element of connecting and focusing, and one thing which I also took from your explanation was more and more widening. I think one aspect of yoga, the gift is more and more we widen, we can take everything. So wideness also helps us operate because the fundamental aspect of you, ego is narrowness, that it's I want everything. Wideness is the deeper aspect that, okay, and then I becomes one aspect of it because there's many facets of my personality that unfolds. So that wideness, that holding, that is what makes life a joyous expression that I can do. It becomes very action oriented because of that holding hand. So then I'm not lost in this stream of what is coming out of my nature. So then psychology in that sense is all about processes, the unfolding of processes. So I have a solid base for seeing the processes that are unfolding and capable of like lifting them, arranging them. So the instrumental arrangement widens to a great psychological arrangement. And that's what my personality changes because it's again where we started from. It's changing from the base. So I'm shifting the base and then expressing in the world. So even when I'm talking to you, it's so visual for me. I was like, yeah, that's the process to be. Like, that's make life so interesting that we can just every day then that becomes a very surprise. No matter today what will unfold, but because I have a assurance of the divine and a support to go out in the world and work, so then I can just work on my nature more and more, clean it, because my purpose is clear. I think I'll just stop with that aspect that the purpose is very clear in yoga, that the yoga is done for the divine and with the divine. But any other cleaning of the nature for any other purpose as such, to be better, to impress anybody, or anything else. So if there is clarity and purity in the purpose of action, it's oriented more towards the yogic understanding of life. So once I have that clear that the yoga is not for me to become a better person for the world, but for the divine, and then the divine whatever tells me to do in the world. So I mean, yeah, that's the key. I mean, my orientation, my purpose, my focus, my core needs to be very clear. And then what comes in is a surprise. And then I enjoy the surprise. And that makes the life beautiful because I know that there's so infinite possibilities in the world and I'm ready for it. So that readiness, with that readiness comes joy. And that's where we live because fundamentally we are all living for that joy, which is distorted as happiness. And then, of course, it opens up a whole different thing. But yeah, that's what I want to offer. I just feel a lot of joy at the moment. So I'll pass on to you.
Yes, I think now it's time to sum up. Uh, so, yoga actually is many things. It is something which gives us an understanding of who we are as we are, that is our lower nature. And in that, we find that our happiness resides in things which are flimsy, fragile, fleeting, mm, and things which may be good for us can be repulsive. Healthy food may not taste good. Physical activity looks like a punishment. I would much rather use a vehicle rather than walk. And sleep, again, may be looked upon as sensory pleasure. Most people can't afford it, but if they could, probably they would like to sleep as long as possible. Now, which means that that is the way we are constituted when it comes to physical things. Again, at the level of the emotional and mental things, we would like to do something which we find enjoyable and have good relationships everywhere in the family, at the workplace, maybe at the most get some intellectual satisfaction from what we are doing. So basically, all these things are revolving around the needs of the body and the mind, the physical, vital, and the mental, in the language of integral philosophy, the vital being the emotional part of the being. So it is this satisfaction that we are looking at. And we find that these things do not bring us lasting happiness. And this type of a discontent, the divine discontent, is what gets coupled with this dim awareness, maybe some theoretical knowledge that the divine is within us and we are not just the body and the mind. And that is what creates in us this urge to change. And as we start changing, what we are actually seeking, as you said, is the divine. That is that highest truth, the highest truth which is everlasting, imperishable, constant, and that is within us. That is what we are seeking. But then, what is the vehicle for seeking it? The vehicle for seeking it is again uh, the life itself, and the tools are the same, the body and the mind. So, that is the beauty of integral yoga, that we are using the same tools, but with a different object, and that object has been given to us again by this deeper truths of existence on which yoga rests. So, in light of that, we start changing, and the result is that food is no longer a sensory pleasure. Food now becomes something which is a necessity, and we should put that type of food in us, which keeps our basic equipment, that is the body and the mind, in good shape, so that we can fulfill the divine will, the purpose for which we have been brought here. We are seeking the divine has sent us with a purpose, and for that it has given us an equipment, the body and the mind. So we should at least take good care of it, and eating the right type of food in the right quantity with the right attitude is one thing that we should do. The same applies to physical exercise. It's no longer a punishment. That is also for the same purpose, to keep this equipment in good shape. And that applies also to sleep. So all just the way of looking at all these physical factors changes. And that is what makes these things a source of a more sustainable joy, as compared to what we were getting when we were treating these things only as a means of physical and emotional comfort. And when it comes to people, the spiritual philosophy or the deeper truths of existence on which yoga rests make us feel one with others rather than separate from others. So the ego starts dissolving, and the antidote to this is love, because once you feel one with others, it inspires love, and love is a sense of oneness. It's not a sense of division. And when we start living life which is driven by love rather than the ego, we find that the problems that we have with our work, with people at the workplace, or problems that we have because of the ups and downs of life, they start dissolving. They start going away. One might say, no, ego is rigid like an ice cube. You can dissolve it with warmth, and once it dissolves, you get water which can easily merge in an ocean. You know, so it's the warmth of love that dissolves the ego. And then we find that this happiness, which is based on uh, giving love and expressing it by giving what we have to those who need it, we find that that becomes a source of a greater joy than any of the fulfillment of the worldly desires and goals that we had. And it's because it fulfills a basic need that we feel fulfilled. And again, it's a process. So as we walk the journey, we find we experience more and more of this type of sustainable happiness, happiness which resides on factors which are within us rather than outside us. But then all these are again byproducts. You said something very important, that actually we are seeking the divine. These byproducts can encourage us to stay on the path, but actually it is for the divine that we are doing the yoga. And this is something which again is important, especially in integral yoga. Uh, the integral yoga is for the divine, not for man. Sometimes it's misinterpreted. What it sometimes interpreted as is that Sri Aurobindo and the mother are against social work, that we are not, it's not for man, it is for the divine. But it is for the divine in man that we are doing the social work. If we keep that in mind, then that social work that we do, all the charity, philanthropy, etc., that we indulge in, all that becomes a source of a greater joy, because you're doing it for the divine in man, and you do not start expecting from this big changes. You do not feel that I am doing it. And you know, so that does not become an ego boost. You also do not start uh, expecting that the world will change because of it. You are satisfied that it is strengthening your relationship with the divine, taking you closer to the divine, and that relationship, which is now deepening, the relationship with the divine that is deepening, the unification with the divine that we are proceeding to, that itself becomes its own reward. And we do not start looking for any other rewards. And that is how we can ultimately sort of even give up these byproducts, such as feeling of joy, peace, and fulfillment. All these are byproducts, and just be one with the divine. But all the same, there's enough encouragement on the way. Just as in, if you go on a long journey, say if you go by train from a place like Delhi to say Kerala, Tiruvananthapuram, if you were to go by train, it's a long journey. But then it doesn't have to be tedious. One can start talking to the co-passengers, see the divine in them, look out of the window, and whatever you see there, see the divine in it. You can enjoy the journey and forget about the destination. Destination will come sooner or later. Being obsessed with the destination being will not bring it any nearer. So, as you again said at some point, time and patience, these are important requirements. So, if I were to sum up the summary, yoga gives us an understanding into the way we are, that is our psychology as it is typically. It gives us a process of improving upon it so that we can get everything that we are looking for in life, such as happiness and fulfillment. So it is a process, and it is also a goal. It gives us a clear cut goal, and that is the divine. So it is both an evaluation of how we are, how we can improve upon it, how we can go further, and what is the ultimate goal of that journey. So yoga has all these things put together, and it is very practical because it is the process can happen while we are living in the real world, engaging with the world, to use one of your expressions, engaging with the world, but without getting entangled. And we are not doing anything different. We are just doing it with a different attitude. And while doing that, we are fulfilling the purpose of our life, making ourselves happier, and also creating an atmosphere of peace and happiness around us. So, what can be better than that? And so that's how it is, both psychology and practical. So, sort of, it gives us an understanding of our psychology as it is, and it also helps us reconstructing that psychology into a new version, the best version that is possible. So, any afterthoughts that now you have?
No, I think you have said it all. It's just that to just have faith in the power and courage in the being that can just help us walk the path, and of course, patience. So, just these three things, and we can make anything with these three ingredients that can help us walk the path and become closer and closer to our own essence. So, and we wish all of us can walk this path with that courage and reach our own goals. So, yeah. Anyway,
Okay, thank you, Aditi, and thank you all.
thank you.